Microsoft did something amazing. First of all, it was the most beautifully executed PR stunt I have ever seen. The introduction of Majorana 1 was like, wow, that was, from a PR point of view, brilliantly executed. I mean, you had all the channels buzzing. I don't know if you've seen the videos of Majorana 1, but it is absolutely spectacular what they've done. But they've done something which is incredible, because when I talk about states in physics, do you know what I'm talking about, Pascal and Stephen? What are the three states?
Solid, gas, and liquid.
And fluid.
So those are the three states. Then you have plasma, which is like,
Yeah,
We
made it
test.
through this one.
We passed the Peter test.
In here suddenly.
But then you have plasma, which is like very, very high temperatures. But there is a fourth state that was actually something that was described in the 90s by an Italian physicist. And this physicist's name was, Majorana. He was Ettore Majorana. This is a weird story, okay? So Ettore Majorana is an Italian physicist. By the way, he was extremely, fascist. He was a fascist physicist, which is a very difficult thing to say. But he was one of the most brilliant physicists that ever lived. And in the 1930s, in 1937, he actually came up with a fourth state, which are particles that are their own antiparticles. So you have an electron, you have a positron. And if you put them together, they annihilate. But he described a state where they could actually work together, where you have a particle that is its own antiparticle, and sometimes they annihilate and it's zero, or they can coexist and it's actually an electron. Nobody has ever been able to see that Majorana state until now. By the way, Ettore Majorana is a very strange story. He disappeared in 1938 under mysterious circumstances after he purchased a ticket to travel by ship from Naples to Palermo. There is an amazing Netflix movie to be made about Ettore Majorana. But Microsoft, almost 100 years later, not only was able to identify the Majorana state, they were able to control it and put it into a chip. And what is amazing about this is that if you build a quantum computer, you need more qubits, because one qubit doesn't do anything. 10 qubits is interesting, but you really need hundreds, thousands, millions of qubits to have a really working quantum computer. And what Microsoft has discovered is not just this new state of matter, where I think they're going to get the Nobel Prize Physics for this, but they were able to control it, and they claim that they are going to be able to put 1 million qubits on one chip in the next 3 years. And if that is true, that is going to be the biggest breakthrough in computers we've had for 50 years.
So, Peter, and what will that do to my life, Peter? How will it change my life?
That's very interesting. So it is very clear. It's there is a very clear problem, and there are many opportunities. The number one problem is encryption. So the current form of encryption is based on the asymmetry of prime numbers. So if you take a really big number and you break it down into prime numbers, that is what is known as an asymmetric problem. Because if you put it into prime numbers and you multiply them, you immediately see if it works or not. Multiplying numbers is really easy. But taking a big number and breaking it down into prime numbers is very difficult. It's the same thing as when I give you a Rubik's Cube that is solved, you can immediately say, it's solved. That's easy. But if I give you a Rubik's Cube that is not solved, finding the combinations to do that is really difficult. I'll give another analogy. If you mix blue and yellow, you get...
Blue and yellow.
You get green, okay? It was not a trick question.
We always get very nervous when you ask this question. We're like, what's the correct answer?
If you mix yellow, blue and yellow, you get green.
Yeah, green.
That is easy. But if I give you green and you have to separate it into yellow and blue, that is really difficult. So that is why if you do an encryption now, like a bank transaction, you use prime numbers, and it can take you like a millisecond to multiply, see if it's correct, but it takes you hours, years, or hundreds of years to actually factor that into prime numbers. But a quantum computer could do a prime number factorization like that. which means that the moment that we have functional quantum computers, they use something called Shor's algorithm, but that's not important. They can immediately break any encryption that we use today. Okay. And today there are cyber criminals already doing that. They now, this is a technique that is known, harvest now, decrypt later. They harvest all the encrypted information. They can't understand what it is, but they're saying the moment we have a quantum computer, we just turn it on and we immediately see everything that was in those encrypted files. So that's a threat.
That's a bad thing to my life, Peter.
What's that?
That's something negative that will happen to our lives.
That's negative. Huh? And that's why you now have a lot of companies, banks, insurance companies thinking about, well, how are they going to encrypt things in a post-quantum world? The other is material science. We might be able to discover, ways to make fertilizers in a different way, make, drugs in a different way. We might change agriculture. We might change genetics. We might change energy. We might build superconductors at room temperature. That is the holy grail of physics. Superconductor at room temperatures, it would change the entire equation of energy. And that's what we're hoping that eventually quantum